Welcome to Birth.world, where we've united many of the most highly regarded, forward-thinking authors, speakers, practitioners, and celebrities worldwide, bringing you insight and clarity on topics related to birth, pregnancy, parenting, and wealth creation for families. I'm your host, Margaux Khoury. Today I'm here with the fabulous Dr. Diane Speier. She is a birth and postnatal professional and holistic psychotherapist with a specialty in perinatal psychotherapy. Dr. Speier was the founder and director of the Family Tree Center for Parents in New York before immigrating to the UK in 1998. She has been a certified childbirth educator and doula since 1978. Dr. Speier created the Birth Empowerment Workshop, a weekend intensive for pregnant couples seeking holistic approach to birth and parenting and to strengthen their relationship. That sounds fabulous. Dr. Diane is a speaker at international conferences on a variety of subjects, including parenting, strengthening perinatal relationships, the postnatal period, perinatal mood, anxiety disorders, and so much more. And she's published articles in journals and magazines on the subject. So Dr. Diane Speier, welcome. I'm just so happy to have you with me.
I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And I know our listeners and viewers are going to want so much more from you after this. So I hope you're prepared for more. You're just...
It's really wonderful to be able to share with you sort of a little bit of my own journey in terms of this work that I do. And that just keeps me engaged after all these years, way past the point of my childbearing. And people have always said to me, well, aren't you, finished with that now? And I just don't get finished with it because there's always more to do, and it's a wonderful way of being in the world, to be welcoming in these new souls that are becoming babies in this generation. So it just keeps me engaged.
Yeah, and you're certainly an inspiration to many, and I know you're like highly sought after, and people just love your information. You have a really wonderful way of speaking about it that opens people's minds and opens people up to the topic. And this is extremely important information because I always say, I'm happy to have you here at Birth.world, but I always say this is information that parents simply aren't getting from mainstream avenues, So it's important that we share it. And okay, you mentioned your story. Let's start there. I would love to hear your sort of short version of your fabulous story up until now.
Oh, it was something that happened. I had my first baby traditionally with a doctor in a hospital.
Yep.
And it was an okay experience, and I didn't require any anesthesia and all the rest of it. But it was when I had my second child in a birth center in New York City. It was the first childbearing center that opened up in the United States. And as part of that experience, I learned it was the staff in the birth center were midwives, and the time that they took with me to answer questions and to help me to understand what was going on really started to inspire me at that moment, really, because it seemed something that I understood. Birth was something I understood. And after I had the baby, and it was a nice 4-hour labor from beginning to end in the birth center, I met with a midwife. Ironically, it was a British midwife, actually, who had gone to the opposite direction of me. She had gone from the UK to work in the United States. And when I was talking about that, she suggested that I do a brand new childbirth education training that was starting in New York. And the organization was the Metro New York Childbirth Education Association. And I did that training, and I met a lot of, at the time, people who were luminaries in the field, and it was wonderful training. But then I moved to California, and it wasn't something that was recognized. So I trained again in what's called the Bradley method, and I taught that for 10 years. But I also moved back to New York. I was living in California at the time. And when I moved back to New York, I continued to teach that, but I also sort of became intrigued about developing my own kind of preparation for childbirth that was very comprehensive, that included a lot more information, and integrated a lot of the sort of continuing professional development activities that I'd been involved in. But also at the same time, very soon after I started teaching birth preparation, I started postpartum support groups for mothers because I had this psychological background, and I was always curious about, what's going on for them. And that kind of morphed into the program that I did for 20 years called Reshape and Unwind, which was a mother and baby exercise class. And those things were informing my awareness about what happens to women after the baby is born. Because that's a subject, and we can talk about that more, but that's a subject that doesn't get nearly enough attention, especially when you compare it to all of the attention a woman gets while she's still pregnant and all the attention about birth. But then after she has the baby, it's like, what happens? And so that also was something that was important to me. After I started teaching mothers and babies, I actually went on and got my master's degree in applied psychology, focusing on the psychology of parenthood. And that also led to my going further to get my PhD. And I got my PhD in women's studies here in the UK, and I used my case notes as a birth professional as the data. So it was a way of using that experience in a way I had never anticipated.
How fabulous.
It was really a rich experience to be able to use that experience at a higher education level. And then I did become an academic for a number of years here in the UK, but I have to say there was a part of me that missed the babies, birth, and the mothers, and so I returned to birth work about 6 years ago, and I'm very excited.
Wow. So it's almost full circle, and now with all this experience under your belt too, with more, and it's fabulous to hear that you're able to use that, because, it just makes me think of how we never know where our journeys are going to take us, and our experiences are going to lead. You're, living proof that anything is possible. And so, and I realize, so let's talk about that then, the postpartum period for parents, for mothers specifically. I know, mothers, I want to mention that the attention is, of course, more so on mothers, but I want to also mention fathers experience a lot of this stuff as well. And that's a whole other, that's a whole other interview, this one topic of postnatal anxiety, mood disorder, etc. So, and I know every person is different, but I am very curious about the similarities in mothers or women who are suffering from mood disorder postnatally.
Well, there are a lot of similarities. I mean, and one of the most challenging and difficult is actually there's a level of detachment between the mother and the baby after the baby is born when she's suffering from some kind of mood disorder.
Right.
And that really interferes with the bonding process. It interferes with her ability to take care of the baby. And there's a lot of concern because, of course, babies' brains develop based on the interactions they have with their mothers, or primary caregiver, as they sometimes use the word. So whether it's the mother or the father, but that's part of their learning process, how the brain wires up for learning and all kinds of other activities. So the loss of that is really difficult. But I think a lot of mothers who are having mood disorders, they feel a little bit dazed and confused about the fact that they're not feeling elated. They just had a baby. They thought it was going to be wonderful. That's not happening. So they're really unable to enjoy anything. They may be experiencing low mood, but also very low energy. They're exhausted. And they may have trouble sleeping. They maybe go to sleep, but they wake up and they can't get back to sleep. And what's really kind of hard is that they wake up even when the baby's sleeping. So these are kind of common across the spectrum of different mood and anxiety disorders. There'll always be some negative rumination. Most mothers are feeling guilty for the fact that they're not feeling this elation, that they're struggling, and they're afraid to admit it. And that's also a big key thing across, is that women are afraid to get help. They're afraid they'll be judged. They're afraid that the baby will be taken away from them. They're afraid that there's something wrong with them, and it's hard to admit that. So for all kinds of reasons, these are the common things. But when a woman is anxious, you have to add on the layer of that anxiety, that constant worry that she's going through. She's worried about the baby's health. She's worried about the baby's weight, baby's safety, that she might harm the baby in some way. or that the baby can't settle, or she can't settle the baby. So, I mean, those are some of the things that are very specific to anxiety that may not be there, for instance, if it's just depression. But, and so she'll have physical symptoms. Her pulse will be racing, her heart will be palpitating, she'll be breathless, sweating. And that's kind of that's really what a panic attack is all about. And so when people have panic attacks, they feel like they have a fear that they're actually having a heart attack. So these are the things that kind of add in when there's anxiety in the equation. Some women experience trauma after birth, and that's another kind of dimension, because they'll have very intrusive thoughts coming in that are hard to, dismiss, or they'll be having nightmares and flashbacks. So, and they'll have all of these things in addition to the original kinds of symptoms that I listed. Sometimes obsessive compulsive disorder shows up for the first time during pregnancy or after pregnancy, and that happens. And then there's also bipolar disorder is also a common thing to happen to begin just during the perinatal period. So all of these things are things to consider. Probably the most serious one is what's sometimes called postpartum psychosis. The old official name was puerperal psychosis, and that's when the woman really loses touch with reality. She's had a psychotic break. She's unable to manage. She's unable to think, and she's delusional. So, and that's a very sad one, but thankfully it's very rare.
Yes. And, it's really important to hear this because it's not talked about openly enough. I mean, now we're just starting to scratch the surface of what we know, and there's so much research being done on it. And, but I love hearing the similarities, because if we have a friend who is pregnant or who's given birth, it's really important for the people around her to recognize this.
Absolutely, and it's, there are certain signs that you can look out for if you see that happening.
I would love to hear some.
And the sooner you get help, the faster you recover.
Right.
And so that's really important. So yes, I think you're really correct when you say that, because I've just watched, it's going on 40 years since I got engaged with this, and I've seen a huge difference in the information that we have. The way things kind of cross over for me as being a birth worker and being a psychotherapist is I have watched the level of awareness grow dramatically only in the last, say, 10, 15 years. So it's a big change.
Yes.
But it's a positive change that we have this awareness about it more. So we can do something, we can act on it.
Yeah, it's so important. And so you mentioned some of the signs already. Is there anything else that, say, a partner, even someone who's so close to the woman, can look out for? Are there things that are
all of those things?
All of those.
I mean, is she just tired, or is she absolutely exhausted?
Yeah.
Is her mood? Is she able to enjoy things? And if she can't, there's a sign there. Is she constantly ruminating in a negative way, feeling guilty? If she's expressing that guilt, that can be a sign. If she's not sleeping well, and it's not about the baby is sleeping better, that's another sign. So if they're looking out for these kinds of things, and by the way, we should also say that there is such a thing as paternal postpartum depression, and that it happens in, that somewhere between 5 and 10% of fathers, fathers and partners, I guess, to some extent, in a same-sex relationship. So it's important for fathers to be paying attention to it, because sometimes what happens is for them, the symptoms show up a little bit later. For the mother, they may be showing up in the first 6 months. For the father, it might be showing up in the second 6 months. And it might show up as more irritability, for instance, anger, more drinking, more going out and working harder. So, I mean, it sometimes manifests differently with fathers than it does with mothers.
And it's so important.
But it is something that does happen. And that's a big change. When I was doing some academic work, developing a postnatal health instrument, I did a number of interviews with mothers and fathers. And the very first interview I did was a father who was depressed.
Wow.
And that opened my eyes. And then I started to look into it more.
And I think that's the one side of it is we don't talk about it or recognize enough, but the other side of it is the other side of that is the fact that it's almost in society or men particularly might be afraid to admit or to say, look, to show these symptoms. And then, if approached or something, they may say, no, I'm fine. Like this is, yeah, I'm fine. It's sort of like a stigma or whatever you call it. And would you agree to that?
Absolutely. And it's not just a stigma with fathers, it's a stigma with mothers
too.
It's the stigma against mental health or mental illness.
Right.
And as it doesn't, in the UK now, they're really working to create some level of parity between physical health and mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's still, it's like still the second cousin of, physical health kind of strategies.
Mm.
But it is really important. And the stigma is what prevents women from getting help when they need it.
Yeah.
It may prevent fathers from expressing themselves, or any concerns that they might have.
Mm.
And it really, there's a very low level of acceptance for this. It's changing.
Right.
But it's changing very slowly.
Yes. And so
that's because there is such a stigma involved with admitting to mental illness.
That's why I'm happy to have you part of Birth.world, because also, your voice is important and we want the masses to hear this and do our part to help parents see all their options, but also hear this information that's so important that's not talked about. When you're talking to a newly expecting parent or a mother specifically right now, or a couple, what's some brief advice that you would give them? Well, actually, just the most important advice that pops in your mind. What would you want them to know? Because just an aside, I love when parents get this information before they even conceive, but before they have that baby, of course, before they know.
And I think the number one thing for me, and maybe I'm biased, but also I haven't been teaching for a while, so I think I still continue to hold this view, is that prepare for childbirth. Take some level of comprehensive course that provides lots of information, but also the practical application of information, so that they'll be able to know what to expect and know what they can do when they're having their baby. So I think childbirth preparation or childbirth education is number one in my book. And it should be childbirth classes that are independent of the hospital.
Right.
Because a hospital childbirth class is going to teach you how they like to do things in their hospital.
Yes.
And it will always be biased towards the medical, more so than, kind of independent thinking and allowing for choices. I think that I really believe in a birth plan, and I have since they started in the early 1980s. And I don't think it needs to be a very flexible birth plan, and it needs to have contingencies built into it, so that, a lot of people approach a birth plan and it's like engraved in stone.
Yes.
That doesn't work because there's too much unexpected that goes on during childbirth. But if there is a contingency, so if this happens, I still want this, and this, it means that they don't have to abdicate what their preferences are just because things didn't go exactly how they anticipated they would. So if it's important to if it's necessary to have a cesarean section, then how do I want that cesarean section to go? If it's required that I have an induction, then what kinds of things will happen, while that's going on? And so if it's flexible, then a birth plan is wonderful. I think they need to research different care providers, whether they want to go with midwives, whether they want to go with obstetricians, and find out what that practitioner is willing to do and what they're not willing to do. Because a lot of people find out at the last minute, they come in with their birth plan. And by the way, I think birth plans are really designed to be a communication tool. It starts the conversation about, this is how I'd like my birth to go. And if you find out that you want it this way and your doctor doesn't, and they never do it that way, then at that point you need to start thinking about, is this the right person for me? You also need to research places of birth, location of birth. Should it be in a home? Should it be in a birth
all
center?
Of that.
Should it be in a hospital? And they have choices about that. And those are starting to increase. More and more birth centers and more women in the United States are having their babies at home. But in the UK, it's really starting to grow because there were the National Institute for Clinical Health, it's called NICE, clinical something in health, set guidelines about a year ago saying that the women actually, in some cases, safer having their baby at home or in a birth center than in what they call a consultant-led center where obstetricians dominate.
Yeah.
And so the home birth rate in the UK is now 3%, whereas it's less than 1% in the United States, but it's still growing.
Yeah.
So caring for the postpartum period is also so important. And they need to have, like a birth plan, they need to have a postpartum plan.
Yeah.
Because they need, like we just talked about, they need to be aware that their moods might change and what to look out for. They need to know that things are going to be dramatically different. Their reality is going to change. They're not going to get back to normal. They're going to establish what a new normal is. They're going to be big relationship changes when partners become parents, and the dynamic changes, and all of a sudden there's a third person there. There's a triangle now, not so much a dyad. And in many cases, because women are breastfeeding, partners and fathers feel left out. So being aware of that and preparing for that means that there'll be less conflict after the baby is born. And we know that 92% of couples experience increased conflict in the first year after birth. So preparing for what happens after. And the very important thing is that what I learned as a childbirth educator, and I used to teach this class, is that people can't take it in.
Wow.
They can't hear about what happens after the baby, after the baby's birth, because the birth itself looms so large. It's like, whoa, I just got to get through the birth, then I'll worry about that. And then they're not having the information they need. So that's and so I think that's important.
Did you say 90% of couples experience conflict after birth? Is that what you said? Wow.
Increased conflict.
Increased conflict. That's a huge percent.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's so important, and I'm writing all this down because you have so many amazing little quotes and tidbits, and I know everyone listening is going to agree with me that this information, like that, it's so important to get out there. So that's our part. That's our job. Tell me. So I love all this, and I know that we could have a separate interview just on this topic. It's huge. I want we could do articles and all of this, but so you created a digital doula app, and I want to I want to make sure we mention it because it's really important. And so tell me why you think this needed to be created.
For the reasons I just started to talk about. There's so little information and so few books ever been written on the subject of what happens after the baby is born. And so there was so little, in addition to that, there's so little postpartum care on offer. A woman may leave and because there's something we used to call early discharge is now the norm. So women will be leaving a hospital within hours of giving birth in some cases, if it hasn't been a cesarean delivery. She hasn't really learned how to breastfeed. She hasn't really learned how to take care of her own personal needs. She hasn't learned how to take care of the baby. So what are we doing? We're shipping them out of the hospital, or we're shipping them home without the necessary learning experience, I guess, the information that will help them to manage all of the huge changes that are going on and the huge sense of responsibilities that they have. So I feel like that was filling a gap, and it really came out of writing a book. I'm in the process of writing a book, and it's called The Handbook for the Postnatal Period, because there isn't that information there. And what happened was I started to write this book, and while I was, it happened just a little bit after my daughter's first child was born. And when I went out there to talk with her, to be with her and to be her postpartum doula, we started having conversations about the fact that there just wasn't anything to read. There were no books on the postpartum period. And so I said, the book hasn't been written. But I kind of, said, I think it's time for me to start writing that book. And she said, I think it is too, because of course she grew up with me being a birth educator. She grew up with me coming to my exercise classes for mothers and babies, so she was very aware of those things. And so after I started writing, she said, you know that book you're writing? And I said, yeah. And she said, I want to create an app for it. And we came up with the idea of digital doula, and because it's like a virtual doula.
Right.
It's available at any time of day and night. You don't have to wait for the midwife to come in or the doctor to come in or the nurse to be there.
So can a birthing woman ask this app questions, or is it interactive? Tell us about
Not
it.
yet. Not yet. Right now, it's chock full of information. There are 6
Okay.
chapters.
Okay.
The chapters include what the 4th trimester is all about.
Okay.
It talks about all of the hormones that are part of this experience. Another chapter is all about breastfeeding. And it gives a more kind of historical and philosophical as well as very practical information on that. It talks about bonding and attachment. And there's another chapter on relationships and nurturing the relationship during that time. But, and it also finishes with a chapter about what I call adverse aftermath of birth, when the unexpected happens. When a baby is born with some kind of disability, when the mother has an unexpected cesarean, but also when there's prematurity, or when there are other kinds of serious difficulties like baby born with Down syndrome. And so that I think that if you write a postpartum book, it has to include those things. You can't, exclude them. But that's not the main focus. The main focus is how to help people have a positive experience during that time in life.
Amazing. I mean, for people who know me, it's like, so you're right though, 90% of women in the US have births in hospitals or outside of the home. And so for something like that, it's very needed. They're left sort of, because I always say too, the intuition or the inner voice is kind of, we've given that over to the institution or the authorities or the people in white coats or whatever it may be. And that's why it's important to have these really important resources for that voice.
And also should say, in addition to the chapters, there are almost 100 different, in the section that's called Hot Topics.
Yep.
There are articles, videos, research, all of these things that we keep adding to it.
It sounds fabulous. I'm going to put the link for everyone to read and see sort of like at the bottom of your interview so people can actually see it. I'm really excited about that.
And I think the reason why it was me that was meant to do this
is
because I had all this experience, 35 plus years of experience working with postpartum women and families, my academic work in the postnatal depression and postnatal health. So all of this kind of came together, and I said, we have to fill the gap, because it's just not enough information for parents who are sort of fumbling their way into and I've worked as a postpartum doula, so I know how that works. And this is a virtual one.
Yeah.
When it launched back in 2013, people said, well, it shouldn't take the place of, a real person doing it. And it doesn't try to take the place. But what about the people that don't have doulas in their neighborhood?
Love it.
What about people that can't afford a doula?
Yeah.
At least they can get information and they can get resources that'll point them in other directions. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I don't think it should threaten any doulas at all. I think it's amazing. I think it's a great tool for doulas, in fact, to be able to use. I think we should spread the word to all birth attendants, doulas, midwives, to be able to use this tool to facilitate their work. And, that's how people should look at it. I'm a doula as well, and I never look at it as competition or anything like this.
No, and it's not meant to be. It wasn't designed to be. It was just designed to, for the person that doesn't have that ability to employ a doula.
Amazing. Amazing. And so what, you're so passionate, Diane, and every time I talk to you, it's just like, my own cup is full, which is an amazing thing because I'm a very passionate person about what I do as well. And, spreading this message. So I'd like to know who inspires you and who drives you and motivates you to keep doing this work.
Well, I don't think I could narrow it down to only one person, for sure. I think one of the earliest, in the days, maybe when I was just sort of well into the development of my work as a birth worker, Michel Odent was a big inspiration for me because we spent a lot of time together back in the 1980s. And in fact, I did a conference. I sponsored a conference in which he was the keynote speaker. But a lot of the time when he was in New York, he would visit with us. He would stay with us. And we would have lots and lots of talks about birth and his views and my views. And we didn't always agree. And then I think Sheila Kitzinger was another very important, because she was a birth educator as well as, an academic and anthropologist and a fantastic author of bazillion books. And she also was a real inspiration for me. I think Ina May Gaskin was an inspiration to me because as I was just getting started, in the year I was getting started, she published Spiritual Midwifery. And that was one of the early books that I read, which really opened my eyes in many ways beyond, because by having a birth in a birth center back in 1976, I was very much radical when I was making that choice. And what she was doing was just sort of taking that alternative perspective, a little bit deeper and a little bit further for me. So, and I remember when I was starting to teach childbirth classes, they had produced a video. Yeah, it was a video called 1,000 Births from the Farm. I know you've recently been to the farm. And so, that was one of my early teaching tools. So definitely there. And I guess over the years, I've been inspired by different people. Marshall and Phyllis Klaus. Marshall Klaus and John Kennel, of course, were the originators of the whole bonding theory, and then also the creators of the doulas of North America, and therefore, the doula work as well. So I guess that's part of it. Oh gosh, so many people. I've really drawn and synthesized material that I've received from so many different people over the years. And more recently, I have to say, Ellie Taylor, who is a real parenting pioneer.
Yeah.
And we've worked together recently because we both focus on relationships.
Yes.
Me through the workshop and her through the books that she's written, and the training that she's offering now as well. And in working together and presenting at conferences, we really saw that there was something, a common ground between us. But I think that the book that she wrote, the Becoming Us book that she wrote, is absolutely pivotal. I think it should be required reading for all parents. And so she's taken my degrees and my education, my training experience on parenthood, and just moved it into the 21st century. So she's definitely been inspiring for me.
That's so nice. That's so nice because, of course, we recognize those names, and we so nice to hear you talk about them like that. And I want to tell you, you are an inspiration as well. So, the very reason why we contacted you and why I wanted you a part of this. So, yeah, it's fantastic the work you're doing. And what value do you see, Dr. Diane Speier, in a community like Birth.world for you or parents?
Well, I love the fact that it's a one-stop shop. And that so much information is available to women. It will open their eyes, it will enlighten, it will synthesize all kinds of materials in one place. So if they have a question about something, they can probably find the answer to that question anywhere in the website. And so for that, I think I've just noticed over the years, and it could be that there's a difference in culture around childbirth education here in the UK versus in the United States. But it seems that the need for education, information, knowledge has dwindled over the years. I can't really say anymore whether that's true in the United States. But because of that, Birth.world means that if they don't take a childbirth preparation course, that at least they can access that information and knowledge, because knowledge is power. And it's empowering for them to know what to expect and what they can do. And I think between the interviews and all the other assets that the website is going to provide is going to make a big difference to new parents or perspective.
Oh, can you still hear me? That's amazing. Okay, good. It popped out there. That's incredible. Thank you for that. And of course, I'm thrilled to have you part of it. And it's going to grow and grow. And I want to highlight you here more than ever. I thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me.
For your wisdom. Yeah, you're so welcome. So, and until the next time, this is Margaux from Birth.world signing off. Bye, everyone.